Oh shit, I'm sorry.
Sorry for what? Our daddy taught us not to be ashamed of our
Games.
especially since they're such good
Design.
and all.
Yeah, I see that. Your daddy gave you good advice.
Lies of P is without a shadow of a doubt one of the best Souls-like experiences you can have that is not made by From Software. This game manages to hit the mark on pretty much every major building block that defines what a Souls-like experience should be. Of course, you have the most important characteristics: poison swamps and good old broken hitboxes. In all seriousness, I think it's impressive just how good it feels to play this game. I genuinely believe there are things Lies of P does better than FromSoft themselves. On the other hand, there are also moments where it shows there simply wasn't enough work or attention put into refining certain bosses, which are arguably the most important part of any Souls-like. I will go into detail about everything I feel like is worth mentioning, and I will try to be as fair as possible. Please do keep in mind, everything I say here is just my opinion, and is by no means factual. Remember how good the world design was in Dark Souls 1? Going through the areas and finding out they're interconnected in some ways never failed to blow my mind, even today, after about a dozen playthroughs. Sadly, this approach to level design was never replicated again, and while I don't mind the way the areas are in future FromSoft titles, I kept wishing there were more levels like the ones in Dark Souls 1. In Lies of P, however, you'll end up finding shortcuts in every single area, and you'll also find out that some areas are in fact connected among each other. At first I thought that this would be something temporary. Surely there's no way they can keep making unique stages that all lead back to the beginning of the area somehow. I was wrong. What makes the exploration even better is the presence of the cryptic vessels. These items are essentially a map that sends you off on a treasure hunt. They encourage you to go back and revisit older areas, and often you'll discover some amazing items, and it also ends up showcasing just how well designed the stages are. The only problem I have with these cryptic vessels is that there are some that can only be completed if you have certain items crafted from boss souls. Meaning, if you don't get the exact item you need, you will only be able to complete it in the next playthrough. This sadly also extends to some quests being locked behind boss soul items. This doesn't affect me too much, since I will do New Game Plus. However, if you want to do a single playthrough, I think it's important to keep this in mind. Back to the level design though, in case you are worried about the environment being very samey or repetitive, thankfully that's also not the case. For example, you go from a Victorian city to a factory that somehow leads to Resident Evil 4, which will then take you to Anor Londo, and you know what? It just keeps going on and on and on, and the stages are just insane in every single way possible. I cannot stress it enough. The level design is top notch, and I firmly believe that this is one of the best things Lies of P has going for it. Another strong point that this game has is the weapon crafting system. It allows you to customize every weapon, except boss weapons, and change either the handle or the blade. Think about it this way. You're playing with a great sword that you like, but the weapon itself ends up swinging rather slowly. You can simply give it a different handle that will completely alter its moveset. You also don't have to worry about it messing up your damage due to scaling, since you can just adjust the scaling to fit your build. I think this is a great feature, although admittedly I myself didn't interact with this system a whole lot, since I mostly used boss weapons. However, as with every Souls-like, I do intend to do multiple playthroughs utilizing different weapons since the weapon designs are top notch, and honestly, the amount of choice you have is nuts. I mean, goddamn, you even have a rifle in a Souls game. You know, you don't need magic when you have bullets, right? Speaking of weapons and combat in general, Lies of P also features a weapon durability mechanic. Durability matters a lot here since you use it not only by attacking, but also by blocking. There will be many situations where you'll have to repair your weapon during a boss fight, otherwise it breaks and ends up becoming unusable. Sometimes this can be frustrating, although in the worst case scenario you can simply use certain items that repair your durability instantly. This also leads us into the next massive feature this game has, and arguably the biggest one: the P organ. I know what you're thinking of, don't you dare! The organ is essentially a skill tree with a bunch of different passives that ends up changing the way you play the game. I know this may seem like it's Path of Exile with Dark Souls, but I promise it's not super complicated. In order to activate any passive node, you first have to fill up the node you're aiming for. In order to do that, you need quartz, a currency you obtain by exploration and defeating various mini-bosses and enemies. Remember how some mimics would drop Estus shards in Dark Souls? This is basically the same thing as that. But anyway, the true customization lies in the mini-nodes you'll find in each big node. From these you can select various passives like increased healing, damage, ergo gained, increased number of consumables you can hold, and so on. These are not that exciting, but they are something that will absolutely improve your gameplay experience. When it comes to the big nodes though, you will find some which I'd say are pretty much mandatory to have. For example, your dodge at a base level is really bad, and you are pretty much forced to invest a few points into upgrading it, otherwise you will have very bad mobility. I'll be honest, my main complaint with this system is exactly this. I didn't like dodge frames being locked behind the stat in Dark Souls 2. I don't like it here either. But besides that, I gotta give credit where credit is due. Some of these upgrades are really fun, and will absolutely change the way you approach the game. Speaking of approaching, now it is time to talk about my favorite feature of this game, the Legion arm. If you've played Sekiro, I have no doubt that you recognize this as the Shinobi arm of this game. But the truth is, I found this to be much better in every single way. In Sekiro, I didn't find myself using most of the prosthetic tools, since a lot of them are situational with a few exceptions. Ah, Flame Vent, my beloved. In Lies of P, however, these arms can allow you to completely cheese out many encounters, and the truth is, they just feel good to play with. I have mostly used Fulminus and Deus Ex Machina, but I've watched a lot of people using other ones, and honestly, none of them ever seemed bad to have. Now obviously some feel better than others, but they all shine in different situations. Remember the P-Organ? One upgrade actually allows you to have two of these. If FromSoft decides to bring something like this back, I hope that it's gonna feel even better than the Legion arms, since these things are just amazing to play with, and the potential is absolutely limitless. All that being said though, one actual issue I have with this game is the overall boss quality. I mentioned previously that some bosses feel like they haven't been playtested enough. Let me elaborate. A lot of the bosses in the second half of the game suffer from their attacks being not properly telegraphed, and I often found myself mistaking an attack for something completely different. That, combined with unprecedented aggression, sometimes even straight up teleporting and awful camera angles, make a lot of the bosses feel like a coin flip in some cases. I'm gonna be honest, I still have no idea how I ended up beating Lexatia, but I certainly consider myself to be lucky since she did not teleport too much in my victory run. Another thing which makes bosses exhausting is the fact that a lot of them have second health bars. I always felt like this is something that should, at most, be used for only a few bosses, because in a way it makes them more memorable or special. We all know how frightened we were during Malenia's second phase. That worked because not a lot of bosses end up getting another health bar for their phase change. I mean hell, Slave Knight Gale is considered to be one of the best bosses ever made, and he only has one health bar. Sadly, a lot of bosses here are just exhausting to fight, and don't get me started on Lexatia. I could go on for hours about why I hated fighting against her. Oh wow, they actually learned from Dark Souls 2. Holy shit. Thankfully this doesn't apply to every single boss, and I'll be honest, I consider the last two bosses to be very good. Now lastly, let's talk a bit about the story. I've really enjoyed it. I think the cast of characters is great. Is it on the same level as Dark Souls 1 or Dark Souls 2 levels of good? Not really, but I will say there are some character backstories which I had a ton of fun and excitement with, especially surrounding Elidoro and Eugenie. It's very hard to talk about the story without spoiling too much, but I will say it's very much like in Dark Souls in the sense that you get most of the story from item descriptions or just listening to character dialogue. It's not for everyone, of course, but I do enjoy this type of storytelling. Either way, I will say I did find the story to be easier to understand than most FromSoft titles. That being said, I'm still gonna watch any lore video I see for Lies of P. Well, in any case, I feel like this game has gotten so many things right, from the atmosphere to the core gameplay mechanics to the world building and combat, with only a couple of pretty bad misses here and there. I'm looking at you, Lexatia and Swamp Monster. All things considered, I think it easily deserves an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10 if you are a fan of this genre. I just hope that this studio ends up making more games like this because, man, it was phenomenal. Thank you guys for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope you all take care, and I shall see you again soon.